Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, baby metal fan. And I just got back from Dragon Con in Atlanta, and more to the point, I just got back from my first ever baby metal concert. And I know this sounds really weird to a lot of fans because I've been into baby metal for 6 years or so, and I've been making videos about them for 3 years or so, as part of videos about other things as well. So it's weird that I'm only seeing them now for the first time, and a lot of people, a lot of fans have been giving me grief about this for a long time, and telling me how my sense of the band would change when I saw them live. So that's going to be one of the questions that I want to tackle today. The truth is, I've never had the opportunity between work commitments. My schedule was not very flexible as an academic, and travel, it hasn't really been an option for me. They actually played in my hometown in Charlotte a few years ago, right before the pandemic, and I was not in the country. It's really just been like that. So what I want to do today is talk about seeing baby metal for the first time. Let me start by saying this is not going to be a video-driven video, in that I didn't shoot a lot. My camera's rubbish on my phone, and I wanted to focus on the show. So, mostly I'm just going to talk here, and I know people get annoyed with me sometimes and say, you talk too much. Well, but yeah, that's what I do. Occupational hazard, call it whatever you like. But yeah, I talk. That's how I process things. And if this channel has any value, that's what I have. I talk. So if you don't like that, with respect, don't watch. So here I am in Atlanta at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. I went with my wife, and we got tickets that included a sound check entry for Death Clock, who was the other band that Baby Metal were playing with, the other main band. But because I was at Dragon Con and on panels, we couldn't actually get over there in time to do that. And I thought that would mean that we would be right at the back, that we'd finish up at the back of the general admission line and wouldn't be able to get in. But, in fact, the tickets allowed us to then join a special line that was admitted into the venue before the main line started. So we actually finished up right down center. Not right at the barrier, but maybe 2 people behind the barrier, and we were located just stage right off center. So I was maybe, 8 or 10 feet from the stage, no more than that. So, the view was incredible. This came with some problems, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we were very fortunate. I felt very fortunate, and that was kind of crucial to the whole sort of surreal quality of the evening. People always talk about the great thing about being at baby metal concerts is that you get to hang out with other baby metal fans. I did meet some people there, and I was particularly excited to meet people who knew me from this channel, who had sort of, many of whom I'd interacted with before. A couple of them came by Dragon Con with books that they wanted signing and things like that. And that was awesome. And it was great to sort of feel connected to people. And I think this is a theme throughout this video, this sense of the way that these concerts make people feel connected to the band and to each other. So yeah, that was great. We were not standing in line for hours and hours hanging out with other fans, but we were, as soon as we were in the venue, surrounded by other fans, and we got talking to a number of people, and the general mood, I thought, was really positive, and people seemed really nice and enthusiastic and into the band. They were like genuine fans. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, because this was also, one of the only... There were 2 negative things about the show for me. Not including, I wish it had been longer. Of course I wish it had been longer, but I knew what I was getting. I knew I was going to get like 11 songs, and it would play just over an hour, and that's what we got. So I'm not going to complain about that. I also have renewed respect for their physical work ethic and how demanding that show must be. So, yeah. But, yeah, the 2 things that I wasn't happy about were, A, the support band, Death Clock, who I I'm not going to say a lot about this because I'm sure there'll be a lot of Death Clock fans who will be sort of up in arms. But let's just no. They relied very heavily on a video, a constant sort of cartoon, mostly of sort of indiscriminate violence and brutality. I don't know if it was supposed to have some higher purpose, and I don't really care, so don't tell me, explain it to me, please. I found it adolescent and amateurish, the kind of phony existential grimdark that gives metal a bad name. I found the music itself repetitive, and for all its sort of hard-hitting posturing, boring. I was just waiting for it to end. And, as I say, I'm sure other people will disagree, and so I'll just say it wasn't for me. And the issue for me was, well, there were two. One, I was baffled by the connection to baby metal. Maybe my understanding of baby metal is different from a lot of people's, but it seems to me that this sort of gratuitous brutality and such, which Death Clock seems to be based entirely around, I can't imagine anything further away from baby metal. It just doesn't seem like a good pairing to me. I also couldn't help thinking that it affected the behavior of the crowd. Now, I'm seeing baby metal for the first time, so I don't know. Maybe the crowd is more violent than we're used to seeing in videos and such. But, I was there with my wife, so that was one of the things, and I was sort of consciously trying to protect her. But there were other people around. There was a guy there with these two little girls who can't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. I don't know what he was doing there, really, if I was honest. But there was an anxiety amongst everybody as the crowd started getting rowdier and the crowd surfing starts and the sort of surging forward and stuff starts. I was genuinely worried for these kids. And the only alternative, apart from them getting trampled, was for the guy to put him on his shoulder, which means, of course, the people behind him couldn't see jack. So not an ideal situation. As I said at the beginning, there were some guys that we were talking to. One of them was from the UK who had come over to see his friend and come to this show. And within 3 songs, he had to leave. He got flattened by some crowd surfing jackass and got hurt and had to leave. And his friend went with him. And I couldn't help thinking there was a sort of painful irony to the idea that this guy who's trying to support his friend, who is modeling what I think is a sort of classic baby metal ethos, right? The impulse to support and be protective, right? Ijime dame zetai and all that, right? To lift each other up, karate, other songs that seem to be built around this idea of being supportive to each other. And he's doing it, and you don't get to see the show because these tools who have come to sort of, I don't know what, to perform what a good time they're having, to get and I get it, it's a metal show, so there's going to be rowdy behavior and body slamming and moshing and all the rest of it. But if for you to have a good time it means ruining the experience for other people, maybe you need to rethink some of your priorities. It's not just metal shows. I went to see Young the Giant a few weeks ago. It was actually the day after the Blink show. I love Young the Giant. I've seen them many times. But in this particular venue, there was a group of people in front of us who talked at the top of their lungs through every song, non-stop, not about the band, not about the music. They were just having a conversation. It was like the band was happening at the same time in their living room or something. It was completely bizarre. And even more bizarre, at the end of each song, when the audience was applauding, these guys were the ones going, woo, yeah, louder than everybody else, as if they were the stars, right? So they weren't even watching. They didn't know any of the songs. They didn't know the band. But then they start whooping and shouting. This is a mentality I don't get. We didn't come to see you. We came to see the act. And I would go so far also with the phone recordings. I know that everybody wants to get little souvenir pictures and bits of video and stuff. But, it's one thing to sort of snatch a bit of video while you're watching. It's another thing entirely to bring a phone the size of an iPad and hold it like this all the way through the show. So you can see perfectly fine. But the people behind you, all they're seeing is your damn phone. What's that about? And then, of course, you get to post the video and say, look what a good time I had. Okay, so those are my gripes. Those are my complaints. And I could make those complaints about practically every concert I ever go to. The crowd were amazing. I had some... Despite my reservations about the rowdiness, the crowd was into it. And I've seen people posting about how the Atlanta crowd sort of raised the bar for baby metal performances, particularly outside Japan, because people were focused and energized. And I think that there was a palpable sense for a lot of people that either they've been waiting a long time for this. It's been a long while since we had the opportunity to see baby metal. And I've seen a lot of stuff from people saying that they were seeing them for the first time, like me. But also, even fans who've seen them many times, in many cases, have had to wait for several years before getting this opportunity. So you could feel that passion and the supportiveness. And I want to say that. And that was particularly clear on songs like Metari and some of the other real sort of interactive songs where the crowd was doing its part. When I posted my first response to Metari, and I got some response from Japanese fans saying, you know, you need to help the US fans know how to participate in this song. But there's no question that they were ready. They were into it. They knew the material, they knew the songs, they knew their parts to sing, and they were, yeah, it was great. It was pretty great, yeah. The show itself, the Baby Metal show, was phenomenal. But, you know, I've always sort of complained a little bit about the band wearing masks. I miss those sort of days of the Red Night, Black Night, those performances of Akatsuki and things like that, where the Kami band, the Eastern Kami band, would come out and do those long solos and come down front and do big performances, and I loved that. And of course, I've seen those videos many times. And I miss seeing that in the live shows of Baby Metal today. But I also kind of get it, that there's something about the fact that the band are still a band. They're still live. They're still playing. And they get their little occasional moments. In this show, there was really only one song in which they each got a little spotlight moment to perform, to sort of strut their stuff a little bit. And the rest of the time, they kind of vanish into the background. Maybe, you know, if you were further back or in one of the galleries and looking down on the stage, then they are more part of the show. But from where we were, the fact that they were dressed in such dark clothes and relatively low lit and in a significantly upstage position meant that they kind of blended into the background. So even though the music is live and has that exciting immediacy that truly live music always has, the emphasis was entirely on the three women, on the singing and dancing. And it totally worked for me. It totally worked for me. I liked those little moments where one of the instrumentalists would get a light on them for a second and they'd do their thing. But when we were focused on Sue and Momoko and Moa, I didn't need it at all. Because that performance was so dynamic and so captivating and so visual. And again, such a nice change from the sort of tedious, completely static performance from the band that we'd just seen, with relying on the cheesy video behind them. But yeah, the work ethic, the presence, that's the word I keep coming back to. I kept thinking about this, and it's a very actorly term, a very theatrical term, which is sort of my thing, and I'll talk about that some more in a second. But I also thought, as a performance, it was as close to flawless as you can get. I wish the microphone levels had been a little higher, though again, it could be that that it was being mixed for better sound distribution further back. I don't know. But from where I was standing, I wanted a little more pop from Sue's mic in particular, though it did sort of come through more dramatically in certain moments. I'll talk about that. So the set list was pretty much the same as the set list from the Houston show, which at the time was the only one I had checked out. So we had Baby Metal Death, Gimme Chocolate, Papaya, Distortion, BMC, and then in place of Maya, which is what I expected, we got Mirror Mirror, which I was excited about. Monochrome, Metari, Megitsune, Headbanger, Road of Resistance. So, as I say, 11 songs, very little breaks in between. I think, you know, most of the time they would do, I didn't pay close attention, 2 or 3 songs, and then they would go off stage for a second, presumably to drink water, and then come back in. There was very little padding, very little wasted time. The songs weren't dragged out interminably. So, you know, it was a very dense set, I thought. It was nice. It was great to start with the classic, with Baby Metal Death, as modified to include Momoko, of course. and then go straight into Gimme Chocolate. And that was when the crowd really sort of came to life and really started to respond, if for good and bad, right? Because, you know, on the one hand, it's super exciting and everybody's pumped. On the other hand, that was when people started getting hurt. Gimme Chocolate. I mean, you know, I think like most Baby Metal fans, it was probably the first Baby Metal video I saw, the first time I knew they existed. And it coincides roughly with when I first started listening to them, right? Right after that video went viral, right before they played live on Stephen Colbert's show. That was when I started watching them. That was when I started to think, this is not a gimmick, there's something else going on here, there's more to this skill and talent and richness and musicality and heart and ideas and all kinds of stuff in play. You know, it wasn't just sort of cute girls dancing around to hard rock. So to see that performed live right in front of me, it's hard to explain. It was a little bit like a number of years ago I was in South Africa and I'm going on safari, and I think I may have used this analogy before for something else, but the first time you see a wild lion or elephant, right, up close, the first time you see it, for me at least, I had this strange, almost existential moment where you think, oh, they're real. This is an actual thing. They're not just things that exist on TV or in movies or in the sort of contained spaces of a zoo. These are wild animals. There are elephants wandering around here, right? There's a leopard walking right up to me, looking me in the face, and it's a real thing. And I felt a bit like that, having watched this band so many times on video and made videos talking about them. There was something really uncanny, almost surreal about Sue and Momoko and Moa right 10 feet in front of me, close enough to make eye contact, which they did on many occasions. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're real. I know that sounds stupid, but that was a part of it. And I felt that particularly in Gimme Chocolate. And then Papaya and Distortion and BMC. And I'll be honest, I've never been a huge BMC fan, but it is clearly one of those songs that thrives on live performance. And it was also, I think, one of, if not Sue's, most spectacular vocal moments, because it gives us that moment where she came right down stage, right to the edge of the stage, and all the backing sound drops out and she does that little sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, this sort of riffing rap section by herself without support. And that's when the voice, you know, was absolutely crystal clear and loud and just perfect, you know. Sometimes when people post fan cam videos of Baby Metal live, the sound is coming from so many weird places and there's such a discrepancy and there's a bit of a lag that affects the tonal quality, and it sounds like she's sort of reaching for the notes. I didn't experience that at all in this show. She was absolutely on point all the time. I didn't hear a dropped note in the entire show, personally. So yeah, I'm a convert for BMC. That was good. And then Mirror Mirror, which, as I say, was a complete surprise because I was expecting Maya. And, you know, I would have been quite happy with Maya, but I'm a Shakespeare guy. And so to see Moa and Momoko right in front of me doing lines from Macbeth was pretty exciting. Somebody posted some things like, oh, they knew you were going to be there, so they did that. Like, obviously that's not the case, but for a split second I was like, oh yes, I feel personally connected. And that's the thing, I think. And again, some of that was about being down front. It was totally worth it to be that close to the stage and to feel that sort of connection. And then Monochrome. And I confess I got sort of choked up, at that, especially that sort of later part of when she hits that third Bokurawa. Yeah, man, that really, I felt that. It felt personal. It felt absolutely rooted. And then Metari, which, I think that there was this, of course, the song's not been out very long, a couple of weeks, maybe less. And so there was a sense of exhilaration in the audience that we're seeing something that very few people have seen before, and that's super exciting. I was really impressed by the number of fans around me who knew all the words, or knew at least the parts that we were supposed to sing, and did so. Of course, I did my Sakura Ya shout, which somebody caught on video. Are you ready? And that was another great moment because, as I said, when I was talking about that song, it was a great way of seeing the extent to which Momoko was a true part of the group, right? And where she gets that moment and she's absolutely there, present. And there's no hesitation, there's no anxiety, there's no apprehension, any of those things. She is baby metal, Looked like she's been doing it for years. And in a sense, of course, she has. But to sort of be centered like that, I thought was really wonderful. It's great. Then Megitsune, because of course, it's an interesting set list when you think about it. It's because even though, so we're looking at like 4 songs off the first album, and then off the second, just Road of Resistance, right? Which was effectively their encore. They didn't do it as an encore, but their closing song. First album has Baby Metal, Death, Gimme Chocolate, Megitsune, and Headbanger. And then the largest number of other songs are new songs. Mirror Mirror, Monochrome, Metari. And the others, Distortion off Metal Galaxy along with Papaya, and BMC, a Japanese release only, right? So, yeah, it's an interesting spread in terms of their career. And of course, yes, there are songs I would have loved to have seen Doki Doki Morning, even if maybe that has sort of evolved out of their playlist now. I would have loved to have seen Karate. But there's a whole bunch of songs I would have loved to see, and not at the expense of the ones that we got, I don't think. There wasn't a weak song in the set. Everything felt absolutely energized and compelling. There wasn't a moment. You didn't have time to think, it's dragging on, or this is not a very interesting song. There was none of that at all. They were absolutely on it from beginning to end. You can't beat that. So yeah, and then of course we got Headbanger, which is a huge crowd pleaser. And then Road of Resistance. And I noticed that somebody posted a video, and whoever posted the video, I'm going to see if I can reach out to them, but they must have been standing just to my left and maybe one person further forward, because their line of sight was almost the same as mine. I was a little bit more central, but their line of sight and their closeness to the stage was almost the same as mine. And they caught the video of Moa accidentally whacking the security guard with her flagstaff. And I saw that happen. And I was actually, the video got posted and people were like, oh, she's so cute and she's you know, she apologized to the security guard, and isn't that sweet? And it was, but in the moment, she actually looked quite upset for a second. To me, she did. And even when I went back and I saw the video, there's a moment where she looks, to me, close to tears, where there's a sudden moment that she thinks she's worried that she's really hurt this guy, before she recovers and goes to him, takes a step out of the routine to go back to him to say sorry, and then rejoin the others and move upstage. And within seconds, she says something to Momoko, and they're sort of laughing about it, and they recover. But for a moment, when it first happened, she looked actually quite upset. I'm glad that the security guard was okay. It was all fine. And those little moments, you know, are part of that sense of liveness. There was another moment early on where I don't know if they missed their cue. The three of them had moved upstage close towards the drums. They were waiting to start the song, and it felt like they had to repeat a phrase. They were waiting to start their move to lead into the vocal, and there was this hesitation, and I saw them quickly talk to each other, and Sue told them what to do. That, to me, was clear. They had their backs to us, but it was clear that Sue was redirecting them. And then they started to move backwards and into the routine. Fans love this stuff because it's like glimpsing the work and the reality behind the polished performance. I'll talk a little bit more about that because we didn't see a lot of that, because so much of it was so slick and so well done and so professional, which I was really impressed by. But the more professional things are, the more those tiny little moments where you think, this didn't quite go to plan, feels even more interesting and exciting, because what it does is, I think it reminds you that what you're seeing is in certain ways unscripted, right? And unique. And I could go to a baby metal show, every baby metal show from now on till the end of the world, and would never see that moment again. And it's that liveness that reinforces that sense of community, that you are present at something that cannot be recreated. That's exciting. I love that. It's why theatre is so different from movies. You go see a movie and a movie is the same over and over. I've talked about this before, but I do think that the sort of the liveness of a musical or theatrical event gives it an extra power, an extra value that means that I store it in my head forever. Yeah. Also why I don't really want to be looking at it through somebody else's camera lens all the time. I liked the way that the choreography was designed to constantly move Moa and Momoko across the stage, so that no matter which side you were on, you got to, you know, see both of them close up, and as I said before, make eye contact with them, you know, and they clearly were doing, you know. And again, there's something very compelling about that sense of suddenly these performers are aware of you as an individual, right? And it feels like a moment of communication. That sounds a little creepy. I don't mean it in a creepy way. I mean, for a second, you're not simply an audience member. You're not part of a mass. You're individualized and invited to participate in what is being performed. And I think that's really magical and special. Cool. But yeah, I thought that the videos that I have seen have been so carefully put together from multiple camera angles and carefully edited to create this sort of unified, wonderful thing. And I thought that in person, I wouldn't see that. In person, I would be much more aware of the clunkiness, the nuts and bolts of the stuff that goes into the production of something which is slicker and more polished. But in fact, again, it's like watching a stage production that then gets shot for video and released as a movie or something. But the stage production worked as a stage production without stopping, without cutting, without changing camera positions or anything like that, without alternating angles and stuff. You see the whole thing in real time. And that's what I saw here. You got more Wizard of Oz and less the man behind the curtain, which I thought was really kind of cool. I thought we would see the puppet strings a little bit more. And what we got instead was this sort of flawless performance, not in the sense of a band, they're sort of playing songs that they've learned how to play and they've sort of rehearsed it, but something that feels like a theatrical event. And it's a theatricality. People always say this about Baby Metal, oh, they're so theatrical. But when they say that, it's often not a compliment. And there's the implication that it's part of that they're not a real band thing, right? Oh, and they have costume changes, and they have big sets and big light shows and stuff. But the thing is, we weren't getting that at all. We weren't getting that kind of big Broadway show type performance. We were getting a black box show. And the black box show hinges entirely on the presence of the actors, the relationship with each other, and with the audience. And that's what we got. And I thought it was really interesting that when the other bands, of course, have water on stage and they're drinking and what have you, maybe not water, maybe they're drinking other things, Baby Metal go off stage to drink. Because to drink on stage would break the illusion. Because they're in character. And so they go off stage to take those momentary breaks and maybe, I don't know, sort of check it on each other, make sure that they know what they're doing. But they're never off stage for more than a minute or so, right? I will say also that, some people complained about those costumes when they first showed up for this tour. I thought they were magnificent. Perfect blend of a kind of old Baby Metal with all the black on it, but all the gold and the iridescent colors and such, they really, really pop, and they look absolutely spectacular and sort of transcendent. And that's part of what I want to talk about here. And I want to focus particularly on Sue. Moa and Momoko were wonderful, and they seem so happy. They seem to be enjoying themselves. I don't know if they are. And as I say, there was that one moment where I thought Moa looked upset and then got past it. But whether they are or not, they are doing a hell of a job at conveying the idea that they are. And it's absolutely infectious. The audience feeds off it. But Sue was a revelation to me. And not simply, I've always said, I think her voice is extraordinary. But her stage presence, her composure and professionalism was just off the charts. She seemed absolutely comfortable and in control. She's always in character, right? She's Sue Metal, not Suzuka Nakamoto. She's Sue Metal. And she controls the space. No matter what they're doing, whether she's doing Gimme Chocolate and she's pulling the sort of the funny faces and the goofy, playful expressions, or the sort of sweet ingenuousness that she can do, alternating that with that searching level stare, which is both defiant and compelling, unignorable, right? And it's that theatricality of her persona which is so remarkable. And this is what makes them different, I think, from other bands. The other bands are doing themselves on stage in some ways. And they're doing something a little different. And she's got this magnetic quality I found really surprising, something which has to be contained by her sort of deliberately self-effacing moves upstage to make sure that Moa and Momoko get the spot. So occasionally it's like she has to move upstage because otherwise she's going to hold our attention to the exclusion of everything else, right? So to let the others shine, I think, is really cool. And then when she comes down again, down center, grabs the audience's attention, it's somehow both dominating and apparently effortless. The Renaissance, I've talked about this before, the Renaissance had a word for this. It's called sprezzatura, and it means the delivery of something which has been carefully studied over a long period, as if it is utterly natural and spontaneous. And I think that's what she's doing, because she's worked at this, and she's built this, right, from a young age. But when she's on stage, she makes it look easy. She makes it look like this is her natural environment. It's like putting a fish in water and watching them be absolutely comfortable in a medium that other creatures would struggle with. On stage, she just sort of pops. And you can talk about it as sprezzatura. Another way to think of it is simply as a kind of star quality. And however studied it is, I think that kind of presence is almost unteachable. You know, as I say, you see this in great actors. The moment they step on stage, the way that they control the space, the way they draw the audience's attention and affection and investment, that's really hard to learn. So yeah, and it's what the best actors do also in another sense, because of course the choreography is carefully planned, the songs have been worked on for years, but in the moment it looks like, again, it looks spontaneous. And as I said, this is what actors do. They've done their work and they've made the connection to the scripted part, and that becomes intertwined with their own selfhood so deeply and completely that they can do those lines night after night on stage and seem to be discovering each thought, each response in the moment for the first time. And we believe it. You know, we believe the emotion that they're going through and we feel it as a result. We don't, I mean, if the actors are really good, right? When an actor starts to be visible underneath the character, that's a problem. It shows there's a sort of disconnect and we no longer believe in the fiction of the play and their part in it. And, you know, maybe whether they think their way into the part in a Stanislavskian way or they're doing a kind of physical technique, to the audience, they are the part that they're playing. Scripted role, mind and body of actor become intertwined. And that's what I see in Sue. She's so in the part she's playing. She is so Sue Metal that it fuses with her actual personhood. So she talks, she sings, she moves as a character, but is simultaneously responding as herself, right? And I think this is why we don't see them drink on stage, right? The same reason we see them give interviews in costume, because there's a separation between their private self and that public persona. And when they're on stage, those two things become absolutely inseparable. And yeah, that was the biggest revelation to me. And maybe also part of why I found some of the audience annoying, because I didn't feel like they were giving them the respect and attention that they merited. Yeah, okay, you want to slam dance and what have you, but there's something really special happening in front of you. Pay attention to it. And I felt that. I felt like I was in the presence of something special, something remarkable, something which, as I say, no matter how many shows they've done on this tour or shows with the same set list and the same choreography, the same shout outs to the audience, that this moment was unique and could never happen again. And real or imaginary, that's the true magic of theatre. So I left with a sense that I had experienced something unrepeatable. Yeah, it was a special thing. And maybe that's all I'm going to say. So yeah, it was great. It's a really good show. And that's what people say. They see you afterwards and they're like, so, especially people who weren't at the show, they're like, how was the concert you went to? And you're like, I don't know how to talk about this. Yeah, it was really good. They were great. And it's so inadequate to something that has a sort of quasi-magical and profoundly dramatic, borderline spiritual kind of experience. Life-changing, yes. Yeah, I think so, in some ways. I can't decide whether this makes me want to see BABYMETAL a lot more, or if there's a part of me thinks I can't beat that and I should stop. I know that sounds paradoxical, but there is that sense that the attempt to recreate something good is often disappointing. And a part of me doesn't want to risk that, you know. Of course, there'll be new songs and I'll want to see those new songs performed live. So, yeah. But yeah, this will be tough to beat. All right, that's it. That's all I'm going to say before I start talking even more nonsense. Not sure what I'm going to be doing next in terms of videos, but, you know, expect to hear from me again soon. In the meantime, please like, comment, subscribe. If you were at the same show or other parts of this tour, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If you have links to videos you want to share, please do. If you have not already done so, please consider picking up a copy of my new book, Hideki Smith Demon Queller, which does contain some baby metal related themes and even mentions the band in passing. And I was fortunate enough, this is a story about a Japanese American family, and at Dragon Con I had the honor of presenting a signed copy to George Takei, which was really something. All right, that's it. Check out my Patreon page. Thank you to my patrons. Check out my merchandise, check out my books, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much.